Welcome back, everybody. It's the March 25th, 2026 AI update, and there's a lot of ground to cover. We're going to start with a quick story that Stefan just shared with me late today, and this is from the Department of Labor, their Make America AI Ready initiative. And this is a new AI literacy course that's available for free. And you'll see on the screen that if you text READY to 20202, you'll register. And they'll give you a week's worth of different lessons. You'll see on the next screen what it looks like. I registered and they sent me an animated GIF of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, as well as this first post saying that it'll be 7 days, 10 minutes a day to learn what AI is, how it works, and how to use it to your advantage. An interesting way to be able to spread the wealth a little bit, to be able to build some AI literacy across the board. I would encourage you to check it out. And it certainly seems like some interesting lessons, just scratching the surface. But this is a good way to be able to make it accessible to a lot of people.
Two quick comments. One thing, it's like, wow, we're going to have to get used to people learning by texting, right? We're all worried about the kids texting in school. We're going to keep up with that. Second, I love the Dorothy thing. The first presentation I did for a school ever on AI, my first slide said, "We're not in Kansas anymore." That was kind of the, and that was in the spring, April 2023. And we're already not in Canada. I mean, we're not already not in Kansas anymore. We might be in Canada. We might invade Canada, but we're not in Kansas anymore. So, but that brings us really right to our first topic that kind of we always talk about, but it's super significant this week. We are now arguably in AGI, or in some part of the transition to AGI, artificial general intelligence, human level intelligence. And we're going to talk just at the beginning, and it's a little bit of a theme, but hey, maybe AGI's arrived or something close to it. There's still a little bit of debate, and even the people who said we have AGI say, well, it's not perfect yet. We're kind of still in transition, but we are starting to now see companies deploying AGI-like systems. And, this just came out yet today. It just came out on Monday. And, if you don't know Jensen Huang, right, the CEO and founder of NVIDIA, the company that makes the chips that's largely been powering this entire revolution, Lex Fridman asked him, oh, okay, well, based on your idea of this idea, there's various definitions of AGI, but just take, say, running a company that could generate $1 billion in revenue, the AI entirely on its own. When are we going to get to AGI? He's like, 5 years, 10 years. And Jensen's like, now. He's like, you can do that now in a digital form. You could, later on, we'll talk about the Clawbots again and stuff that he's been talking about. But you can basically organize an entirely digital company that's capable of generating $1 billion in revenue. And we'll talk about some caveats of that in a minute, but there's kind of one of the most significant people in the space. Somebody people view as very trustworthy, who doesn't hype things, who says, we have AGI.
And then there's even the person who coined the term AGI, artificial generalized intelligence, and was responding in a subreddit, I believe, talking a bit about this, and answered to someone said, well, Lars, I invented the term, and I say we have achieved AGI. Current models perform at roughly high human level in command of language and general knowledge, but work thousands of times faster than us. Still, some major deficiencies remain, but they're falling fast. This is from science researcher Mark Gubrid, who was the one that coined that term. And it's just another important voice, not to say that we necessarily have, but there's a lot of questions about maybe we have, or at least we've come very close. I think we won't really know until we look back some point in the future and say, yeah, that was really when we crossed that threshold. It's kind of irrelevant whether or not we technically have or haven't. We've gotten to the point where the models are certainly compelling, that they're able to do really interesting, creative things. And a number of people are opening up the debate as to whether or not we've already crossed that threshold.
And, like I said, it is kind of coming with a couple caveats. Even, when Jensen said it, he said, okay, it's in the digital. It's like, Lex is like, well, could he build could the AI build and run NVIDIA? And he's like, no. And the thing about it, we don't have all the physical AI developed. Yan LeCun was probably like, oh my God, having a heart attack if he was listening, right? Because, he thinks you kind of need the world models, that physical understanding of everything. And of course, we still need humans to run a $4 trillion company, not just because of, regulatory and reporting requirements for public companies, but just because, you need a significant number of humans interacting with other humans. But to say you could generate $1 billion in revenue entirely in a digital form, is significant. Of course, there are other players who, didn't even necessarily address this directly. Satya Nadella at Microsoft still saying we're kind of far away from this. Dario Amode is, even more kind of optimistic, says, another year or two, Sam Altman, not yet, right? But again, it's kind of part of it's part of a continuum, and something that Ray Kurzweil said. It's not like there will be AGI or not AGI, but everybody's going to get to their own point where they recognize AGI. And I just know what I've been doing with Claude, right? It's pushing me in terms of, I got to figure out, I got to kind of keep up with Claude in terms of kind of what it can do and understanding what it's doing, with the different kind of even just kind of word processing tools, Excel tools, all these other kind of tools or skills that I think that they officially call it. So I feel in many ways it's already more advanced than me. Clearly, as you know, it's more advanced in math. But that's not just because it knows a little more math than I do. It's because, it just came out and solved a problem that they said humans probably would never have been able to solve. So
the other aspect of this that's really kind of surprising to me and gives me some doubts as to whether or not, we've gotten to AGI or not, is that, Claude Opus 4.6 is something that I use extensively. I use it regularly throughout the day. And if I use it in the chatbot interface, I'm very impressed by it. But I'm even more impressed when I'm interacting with it through Claude Code or Cowork and all the other capabilities. When you build out the harness, the system for interaction, for it to be able to demonstrate its further capabilities, then we start to see there's a lot more going on, and the capabilities are far greater than what we probably anticipated. That's pretty shocking to me, and it's the same model. So it makes me wonder, maybe there are other capabilities there that we just really haven't even gotten to yet. We can't have it demonstrate yet. And maybe it is able to do much more. Maybe there is something else going on there that we're just not aware of because we haven't found the interface for that to occur yet. So, I mean, there's a lot here to wrangle with. The last point that's ever made here about the stakes, remember OpenAI and Microsoft, originally when Microsoft had that $13 billion investment, we thought that was so big in the early parts of 2023. And that's it seems almost trivial compared to the investments now, but it was still a sizable investment. There was a clause that said that Microsoft would continue to have access to OpenAI's models until they reached AGI. Now that's been renegotiated, rewritten. We aren't exactly sure how that's spelled out now, but there is something in that agreement about once you've crossed over the threshold for AGI and whether or not you can determine if that's AGI, that would sever their connection and would have some other profound impacts on certainly a lot of the businesses. So this is something certainly worth following.
And, this was, pointed out in one of the articles or one of the discussions of this, I forget exactly where it came from, but and it brings up an interesting caveat. Okay, in humanity's last exam, like I said, if you can look up these questions online, I don't even understand what they mean. And I've heard people with PhDs say that, and in physics say they don't understand what they mean. So, the AIs are, just hitting about, 50%, whereas humans, the top experts in the field, can hit about 90%. Now, again, that goes to the definition, right? Say, well, in order to have AGI, some definitions say you have to be able to do at least what all the top people in every field can do. And we're not there. But you don't need the top people in every field to have a digital business that generates $1 billion in revenue. I mean, high school kids could probably do that. We talked last week about how there were two 17-year-olds who I think by the time they were 19 built like a business in using AI, and the estimated exit was $75 million. So they're not the top level experts in any field. They didn't even have a high school diploma when they started. Kind of really gets at the definition.
And even that human expert is an expert in one field, not in all of them. And so it's kind of hard to say that that's a model that even fits. Now we're moving on to a discussion of agents and the age of autonomous agents. And this is just an area that's exploding in terms of commercial development and open source development, certainly happening across the board. And NVIDIA had its big meeting this week, GTC 2026, 35,000 people there, I believe, attended. And really, agentic AI took center stage. And one aspect of this that I wanted to touch on, then I'll turn it over to Steph to talk a little bit about some of the others, was their embrace and Jensen Huang's embrace of what OpenClaw is capable of doing and what it's been doing. And they announced NemoClaw, which is their enterprise-grade version of OpenClaw with the full NVIDIA stack. And so we see this happening across the board. Really, a lot of companies not only are doing parallel OpenClaw, installments, but also similar types of architectures to OpenClaw. It's really astounding what Peter Steinberger did. He was just at the right place at the right time and certainly had the technical capabilities to do it. But it's really had a rippling effect that is now impacting trillions of dollars worth of work that's being done in the field.
And yeah, I mean, I think that really kind of sums it up a lot, right? It's just that what he's saying, saying the OpenClaw is like a ChatGPT moment, right? And a lot of people still don't know what OpenClaw is. I taught an adult learning class yesterday, and I had ordered this tie, my OpenClaw tie, and I asked my lobster tie, so an OpenClaw tie, and I asked people, "Oh, anybody know why I'm wearing this tie?" And they kind of looked like I was just asking them why was wearing a tie. They had no idea. But I will say, on a positive side, I had an AI class after that with high school students. Two of them, I kind of made sure they could see my tie in the screen, and two of them started laughing. Like, they got it right away. So I was like, all right, there's hope. But he's basically saying, we're in an agentic shift, and that's what we'll keep talking about here in a minute. And, this was just one development. This is a paper that came out of Meta, and I just had a chance to look at it. And basically what it's saying is, as far as I can unpack it, is just like, okay, you think of like how the agent would be trained to go out and do stuff and interact with other agents. But now they've got the agents, like, as they're interacting with the other agents, they're learning and able to modify themselves and get modifications from other people, just like as if you might give me feedback and then I'd like immediately implement it in real time. So imagine, we're having this conversation and, you send me a text like, hey, you're talking too fast. And like, I just kind of immediately respond, right? So that's a pretty significant development. Not just, what we talked a lot about agents interacting before and checking each other and all these kind of things and joint decision making, but they're also kind of modifying their own behavior, so to speak, as they go, which is obviously a human level quality.
There are several capabilities here within autonomous agents that are compounding upon one another. And part of it is the persistent memory. When they're building in better memory systems so that the agent isn't just acting as an immediate instance, then shuts off and starts fresh again, that persistent memory then allows for that reflection and allows for that iterative development and its own improvement. And this is just one aspect of it that's also building upon different layers of the architecture and the stack that's being used and the model that's being used. Each time there's an improvement, it has a compounding effect so that it becomes even more capable in new and really unforeseen, some of them unforeseen ways.
And also then we're talking about, okay, these AGIs, and we'll just talk about this briefly, but kind of scaling into the physical world. Because as we know, or at least as we've said on here a number of times, these kind of AIs are essentially the brains of the robots. And the robots are using the same kind of reinforcement learning to learn about in the physical world, right? So all these advances, even in OpenClaw, is kind of be applied in a physical robot and kind of move on. And if you, and here, this, I just saw this basically in Shenzhen's like, maybe one of the financial capitals of China. It's a beautiful modern city. It's right across from Hong Kong. It's like one of the two kind of technical capitals of the world, Hangzhou, being the other, where Alibaba was founded. But they're having an OpenClaw kind of like essentially, a coding contest, right? To a hackathon, right? In China, OpenClaw is like, you can ask someone in China, you can say OpenClaw, and they know what it is. As you know, I've done some work with people in China, and I've been talking about OpenClaw, and everybody knows. If I wore this tie to a meeting with people from China, everybody would get it. So OpenClaw is really kind of spreading around China, and they're having a hackathon so they can improve their robots, which are already way more advanced than U.S. company robots in some ways, and just developing it out.
I think the other aspect of this that's worth noting, and we'll get into it in the coming weeks, but remember a few minutes ago, I was just talking about kind of interacting with Claude as a chatbot versus Claude with code or cowork. You have the harness. You have a set of tools that that the primary model of Claude Opus 4.6 now has access to. And we have different kinds of interactions. It gives us then a different understanding of what the capabilities are of that model. It's the same model that could be used, but when it's framed and structured and presented and interfaced with a different thing, then it has new capabilities. Now think about taking that same model that currently seems really so productive and capable because it's not just a chatbot, but it can do more persistent work and has a little bit of persistent memory. When we put it into an embodied robot and it's capable of then doing things physically in the real world, that is a different, I mean, you could take the same model and just imagine how that might change our interaction with it and our appreciation for its capabilities. Now, there'll be some limits. I'm not saying that it's going to be able to do anything, but if you just even take the models that we have now, and, we'll get to a discussion about what Claude Cowork is able to do now with operating your own computer, that's just operating still within silicon. That's just all in bits and zeros and ones, and it's not in the real world yet. If we get into the real world and something like this, and that's what's exciting about this kind of a hackathon where they're able to work on it with actual robots, we're going to start to see different kinds of capabilities than, even beyond what we thought robots were going to be able to do.
And, in this next section, so there's kind of a couple of ways, you can kind of deploy the agents. You can use the agents yourself, and then you can imagine like wide-scale deployment of agents across industries. So in this section, we're going to talk about the individual use first. And, there's just story just going around, and, some people, you can imagine the jokes that are kind of trying to be made, but that Mark Zuckerberg is building a personal agent that wants to help run Facebook, and people are kind of making jokes, like I said, as you can imagine. But, in the more serious discussion, it makes sense. He's like, okay, well, not a lot of times now when he wants an answer to a question, he has to go ask Joe, who asks Sally, who asks Peter, goes find something in the files, right? And the CEO is only going to have so many direct reports, right? So, and even if they occasionally find somebody else to get a question answered, in and of itself is time consuming. And here it's just like, just tell me, right? They don't even have to put it in the Slack group, right? To get the answer in the Slack group or send out an email or a text or anything like that. They can just kind of get all this information right there, which allows you to make kind of better decisions, like just, in any traditional sense. You have more information. You have real-time information. You're saving a lot of money, which, multiplies. People talk about, 10x, it's just kind of a concept. How can you get 10 times as much work done or have 10 times as much of an impact? Well, that's there. You might have a 10x quality decision, but also you're saving a lot of time on any individual task. So that kind of multiplies the number of tasks you can do.
And just think about a meeting that you're probably in. If you spend a good portion of that meeting just giving everybody an update on what's been done, that's time that is really just wasted when you could use an agent that would automatically inform everybody and integrate it within their own data set. This is that data layer, that layer of intelligence that we've talked about before. And I've been talking a lot with my students about. If you can access that layer of intelligence and using agentic AI to be able to immediately access it and do something with that data, that's what Mark Zuckerberg is trying to do, is to access that at the very immediate level. That would produce a great deal of efficiency. And there's a lot more you'd be able to do with it. And then being able to manage beyond that, and certainly discussions about maybe even a reduction of workforce within Meta, because they won't need as many people if they're able to automate a lot of that. Now, this is what I was talking about a minute ago, and it's a new story that just came out, I believe, yesterday, that the Claude is now allowing you to let it take over your computer. And so within Cowork, if you have a Pro or Max account, they're doing this as a beta. I just turned this on myself and starting testing with it. It's a lot like the Chrome extension in that if you turn it on Chrome as the Chrome extension, you can have it go through and look at a page and basically take snapshots. It will act on it. It's pretty slow. It's a little bit cumbersome, but even if it takes 3 times as long as I would have taken, if I just let it do it, it saved me that amount of time. Even if it took longer, I can have it work on its own. This takes that further outside of Chrome. It takes it onto your entire computer. It can then view your computer. It can open apps. It can take actions for you. And this gives you a further set of capabilities that Claude is able to access. So think about it. You move from the chatbot, you move to Claude Code or Cowork, where you're giving it access to certain files. Now you're giving it access to your broader computer. And this is really just a response to what was going on with OpenClaw. This is a more secure way, not totally secure because there are mistakes that can happen, but it is a more secure way of being able to get the capabilities of OpenClaw with Claude and being able to do that with a fairly cheap subscription. And I think a lot of people are going to see this integrated into their workflow pretty easily.
Google released two things, one of which is called Stitch. It's just kind of it's a board. Like people used to draw on the whiteboard, and then they'd get the engineers and the programmers to go out and kind of build what they created. And then you could kind of draw this on your computer. I did this on one class I took when I was learning how to use VR. And then now but you can just kind of do it right here on this Stitch thing that they created. And then you can use tools that are connected right in there. AI Studio just to kind of build your app. So it's another way we talk about yapping an app, conversations with an app. But here you can just do it through the Stitch.
So you can vibe code, now you can vibe design, and that's built into AI Studio for Google. So it gives you really the full workflow from designing the interface, the design of the app, and building it out to something that's production ready. Now getting on to agent scaling and thinking about moving from the individual to the enterprise level.
And, here, like we said, the things are happening on the individual level. And now what they do is they want to scale this into companies, starting, of course, with the largest companies. And one of the moves that OpenAI is making is to make a deal with private equity companies. Private equity companies are companies that kind of buy and sell businesses and, kind of help create them anew and all these types of things. And what they want to do is get those private equity companies, whatever companies they have in their portfolios, they want to get them fully integrated with AI and the AI agents. So they're saying if you sign up and you do this, we'll guarantee you a 17.5% return, which is a very high return. Now, in this space in general, there's huge returns. There's NVIDIA at some points on some of its services and things that it's hardware that it's selling, getting like an 80% return, which is like just completely outrageous. But it's possible here that you could get a 75% return. And of course, the private equities companies, they have money to play with, so to speak, on their own. So it's kind of a great idea, and it's a great opportunity for OpenAI, and we'll see if Anthropic makes a similar move.
Now moving into the next section about how AI is getting smarter than us. What happens when we get to the point where AI surpasses human intelligence as we're extending the discussion about AGI?
Yeah, so, and there's a couple instances, right, are coming up, and we talk about András Karapathy. People say maybe the greatest living programmer was, invented kind of self-driving for Tesla, was one of the co-founders of OpenAI. And as he's been doing more with kind of these new like vibe coding tools, like so to speak, and he's able to run kind of like he's using these autonomous agents, right, to kind of improve the code, even in the original ChatGPT 2.5. And 2.5 is very important, right? That's the older version. So I don't want to mix that up with the 5. But 2.5, right? And he's saying, look, I worked on this. I worked on 2.5, and it's finding all these things, whether they're errors or just like, more greater optimizations or better ways of doing things, right? He's saying the AI is finding all these things that I never found. And my involvement now is probably just better to let the AI do this, that I need to step out of the way, right? Everybody's talking about and they've been talking about, and some people are still talking about it because I don't think they really get it, about the human in the loop. But in many instances, for many things, the AI is already smarter than us. So why would we put ourselves as the human in the loop in the instances where the AI is smarter than us? And, there's kind of no like moral question, right? Like the optimizing ChatGPT 2.5, this isn't a question of morality and judgment or something unique about human affairs, that he's saying we need to step back. We need to get ourselves out of the way.
And this really is about where the human is in the loop. It's not creating the bottleneck where it's not necessary. It's not to say that we wouldn't have humans involved, but we really do need to take a step back collectively and think about what is it that we want humans to be making decisions about. And fine-tuning, micromanaging is not it. And for Andrei Karpathy to say this is really quite stunning, that he's saying he has to get himself out as the bottleneck. He's holding it back. And he's probably one of the most very capable researchers on the planet at this stage. So we should have a role for humans to be making decisions, but now we need to start thinking about where should that be placed, because we are going to create a bottleneck and we will slow it down. Where do we want to slow it down? And that's going to come to what Stefan was saying, the ethical decisions, the applications, the impacts on society. But we should get out of our own way and allow us to have time for that to happen instead of trying to gum up the works in the meantime.
And, and in terms of this, and, this is related, right? Like kind of getting back out of the way. China just released Minimax, not China, the Chinese model Minimax 2.7 was just released. And when they released it, they said the model had created many of its own improvements, right? So here, the model is operating without a human, and it's making its own improvements, which, to get to the point we just discussed, right, shows that is possible. All right. But also then kind of creates like a larger question, like, are we yet in a rapid takeoff, right? We've been in a little bit of a takeoff. How significant are these changes? Because even, earlier when, was figuring out the AI figured out how to optimize some server space at Google, that's kind of it is an example of recursive self-improvement, but in a very kind of narrow range. But if these things are starting to become more significant, if you have multiple models engaging in recursive self-improvement, then kind of all those instances in a way of recursive self-improvement add up to something, and they're going to get greater, right? Just as the AI is expanding. So we're seeing the AI kind of acting on its own. In some instances is more capable than humans, and also that it can make itself better.
Now, moving on to the human impact. And when AI progress has a human cost, really extending that discussion that we were just having a minute ago about the role that humans should be playing in guiding this and figuring out how we deal with that kind of progress. And starting off with something we've talked about before, the AI layoffs are accelerating. We talked about Block occurring before, 4,000 jobs that were lost, about 40% of the 10,000 person workforce. Now, Oracle is talking about 12 to 18% of its global workforce, some 20 to 30,000 jobs. They're freed up so that they can fund AI data center expansion. And we're seeing more stories like this. It's also not entirely clear, and there's not often transparency about how many of the jobs that are being laid off or not being hired for are due to AI leading to efficiencies or being implemented. And there's also discussion in Congress about what should be done to make sure that the government and that corporations are being transparent about how layoffs or how labor statistics are representing the impact of AI on the hiring or on lackluster hiring practices.
And just to follow on that one briefly before we move to this slide, I showed you kind of right before we started the podcast, right? There's a story about Jamie Dimon and him saying, like, look, the government needs to do something about this. There is going to be a lot of unemployment. The government needs to do something about it. Maybe industry, collaborating with industry, maybe some incentives. It's really hard, right? Like the government's just not in that space right now at all. They're fighting wars and trying to get people through airport security lines. And many people in government don't even realize the size of the problem. And then, some people don't understand that the free market, like we might have to just completely change our way of thinking as we enter into a new industrial era. And then it's just complicated, right? Like I was telling you, like before we started, every industry in your space would have to agree to carry this extra cost of humans, right? And if the AIs are smarter than us, willing to have in that particular application that an industry is using, willing to have the humans get in the way to slow down kind of what the company is doing. So this is like way more complicated than anyone kind of is talking about. And, on this just popped up too, like putting these slides together. The State Department, I didn't even know about this, launched a Bureau of Emerging Threats. So, we just talked about how the government was kind of like, they're kind of disconnected on this kind of whole employment question, but of course they're very interested in war and security threats, right? We don't worry about positive peace. We worry about negative peace. And they're launching all these like Office of Cybersecurity, Office of Information Security, Office of what's this one here? Disruptive technology. This is just very disruptive. Technology, right? Office of Space Security, because it impacts outer space, maybe even finding extraterrestrial life and making threat assessments. We have all these drones. I texted you yesterday. You could buy a drone on like Alibaba, which is like just as good as the drones that Iran was using. So there's just a lot of stuff that's kind of that AI is just here. It's just exploding. It's changing the whole world, and hardly anyone's paying attention.
Another example of a corporation making cuts as part of targeted adjustments, and it really also points to really the lack of transparency. It's not clear exactly what that impact is. I don't know that anyone is going to be that transparent about it, other than the strident cases where they're using it to maybe cover up other problems or need to raise money for other purposes. But this is another example, and we're going to continue to see these. And I think what'll happen is that it's going to be a drip, drip, drip until all of a sudden there'll be a lot of jobs that are the people that are laid off, unfortunately, and it's going to be hard to manage at that stage.
And one of the things, just quickly on that, I should have put that slide before. Two comments on the slide thing. One is the one thing I really noticed in there is like 70%, 70 of the people I think they got laid off were technical writers. And one of the things I said from the very beginning, obviously writing and English professors, they hit this first, right? But I thought old technical writing, that's going to be one of the first thing that struggles, because all you don't care about like how nice it sounds or like how engaging it is. You need it to be just as crisp and clear and like direct as possible, so somebody can use the product. So we're seeing that impacted by AI. But the second thing I would say, I messed up the order on the slide. That was a human error. Okay. But this is the first time I experimented with Gamma. I used Gamma to build this, and I experimented with Gamma before, but I didn't, it was okay. Then you told me, oh, it's great. So I used it today. And again, this saved me even more time. I got very good with, you're pretty good with using the PowerPoint in Claude, but like, as you said, this will help you generate images and everything. Then when when we talk about our next presentation, you will see it really generates impressive stuff, and it helps organize things, and it has an agent right in it. You don't even have to edit the slides yourself. You just say, hey, slide 13, change this around, and it does it. And I say all this, we don't, we're not getting a cut from Gamma. We don't have a code, so we can get 6 cents every time somebody uses GAN for anything like that. I think this Gamma app for slides is really good.
And this is something we're seeing in a lot of different applications and platforms. Replit now has its agent version 4, and you just see the agent being built in, and it's natural language direction. And you're going to see more and more of this. It's going to build out capabilities. The only companies that don't have it are the ones that just haven't integrated it yet, because the tools are so good. The models are so good at being able to implement this. We just have to give them access to the tools, and we'll end up with better products. But I think that's where we start to see the crack. If you can have it do that kind of work, and imagine people that, it's not like anybody, there are very few people, their only job was to create PowerPoint slide decks. But there are people that spend a good bit of time doing that. And I have over the years, or, importing, a new course into Canvas. And I found I could get Cowork to do it for me in a matter of a couple of minutes, instead of importing things separately and updating items and spending hours on it. We're just going to see that start to compound across the board as we build out the tools. I think the models are already there. It's a matter of giving them access to the tools and access to the data so they can act on it. So we'll stop there. Thank you, Stefan, for this, and we'll see you on the next update.
Thanks, Ron.